Hi, everybody. Welcome in. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful week so far. The weather is so nice here. The temperature is like right in a nice 79 spot, which is not if you live in the South. Like, I know that sounds hot to some of you, and it is hot. I mean, but it's a little lower than normal. The humidity is a little bit down. There's a little bit of a breeze. It's dare I say, feeling a little fall-like out there. Sky is blue. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. I'm ready. I am so ready for the temperature to change. I'm ready for it to come down even more. Ooh, so how are you guys doing? I hope you're having nice weather wherever you are. And listen, can we all take some of Mary's energy? Listen, I was scrolling through the comments here. Sorry, my nose is itching like crazy. I was scrolling through the comments, and I noticed the very first comment that I read today was with Miss Mary. And she said, I'm having an amazing day, even though I'm at work. Can we all just can we embrace that? Can we all have some Mary energy today? Because she's having an amazing day, even though she's at work. Can we just spread some of that around? Mary, you are just an amazing human being all the way around, not just because of that. I mean, you're a talented artist and just a wonderful person. So let's spread some Mary love around, because I think that we all need some of that for sure. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Brenda. Hazel is here. Anita is here. And Laurie is here. Cindy, a couple of my Marys are here. Miss Carla, how are you? All right, everybody. Miss Bonnie. Hi, Lisa. All right, so here we are. Sorry, I keep scrolling through the comments. You're like, what is she? I'm scrolling. Amy says you placed second in a county fair with a bracelet. Congratulations. That's so exciting. I love that. I love that. Mary, you're so right. Life is too short to not have joy. I agree. 100%. So here we are, and we're gonna do a little chat today. So it is beneficial chat, though. We are doing a jewelry making 101 today with questions and answers that you guys have posted. A couple of questions that were posted in the last time that we did this that I didn't get a chance to answer. And we're going to talk about stringing materials. We're going to talk about bead shapes. We're going to talk about any other things that you guys have asked. I do know that going through the stringing materials and then talking a little bit about bead shapes is probably going to take up the majority of the time, but that does not mean that you should not still ask your questions. So if you have jewelry making questions that you need answers to, or that you would just like to know the answer to, please post it here in the comments. If I don't get to your question today, it will be saved and we will add it to the next time that we do this. Now, I actually would like to start making this more of a thing that we do on a monthly kind of basis, because I realize that we are always gaining new members at different skill levels, and there is always something to talk about. There is always a question to be answered. So I'm looking at maybe putting together a comprehensive schedule for us that maps us out for an entire month, so that you guys can know what to expect every Tuesday that we get together, every Friday that we get together, even though those are always Feel Good Fridays, so that we have more of a consistent schedule that you guys can kind of get used to. So that's something that I'm kind of playing around with, and I'll let you know as soon as something like that comes out. My team and I will put that information out there for you so that you can keep up with it. But I would love to do this kind of 101 question and answers kind of session often. Because there's no way to ever answer all of the questions. But I do have a really good place to get started with questions today. So that's the plan. Now, here's what I'm going to say to you. If you are brand new to jewelry making, I want you to know that there was a previous question and answer video that we did not too long ago. That video has some great information about bead stringing wire, the information on the packaging, how to, purchase the correct findings to go with that bead stringing wire. Those questions have already been answered. And I would like to just refer you to that particular video, just so that we don't spend a whole lot of time today talking about bead stringing wire, because I can talk about bead stringing wire for an hour. So I will keep it kind of simple and basic as we go through the different kinds of stringing materials, some of them. But just know that there's a bigger breakdown of bead stringing materials or bead stringing wire in particular in a previous question and answer. And there's a link to that my team is dropping here in the comment section. So if you need that information, it's still there. It's still available. You just have to go to a previous video. Okay, so I've got a couple of really good questions to get us started. I'm going to turn you around so that you're not staring at me the entire time. But I want to talk about stringing materials first. Then we're going to talk about bead shapes. Okay, so one of the questions that I get asked on a pretty semi-regular basis is, what kinds of materials do I need for what? In other words, how do you know what stringing material to use for what? And this is a really good question, particularly for those of you who are beginners and maybe are a little overwhelmed with what possibilities there are. I mean, look, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things on the mat here, and this is only just scraping the surface of what is available when it comes to stringing materials. Now, a lot of the stringing materials, it really is going to depend on what kind of beads you're going to be using and how you want your piece to move and how you want it to feel when you wear it. So that being said, let's go through some of the most common ones as quickly as we can, and then we'll move on to something else. And then if you have even more in-depth questions about each one of these, we can definitely try to backtrack a little bit. Okay, so let's start with bead stringing wire, because this is the one that is you guys see a lot here, particularly on Feel Good Fridays, where we do lots of stringing. And again, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about how it's made, 7 versus 19 versus 49 and all of those things. You can find that information in a previous question and answer live that we did. So I'm just going to skip over all of that part, and we're just going to stick to the general information here because time is always kind of limited. But if you are looking to create just bracelets and necklaces, bead stringing wire is usually and I know that bracelets and necklaces is very general kind of term, but for stringing projects in particular, bead stringing wire is the way to go. This is really the most common material that you use. It's a great place to start for all of your stringing projects. It doesn't fray, it holds its shape, and it is really, really strong. And the thicker the diameter, obviously, the heavier the beads it can accommodate. So this is really, really the where most people start with their on their beady journey, particularly with stringing, is with bead stringing wire. It comes in a couple of different brands. There's Beadalon, which is my absolute favorite. Softflex has some. There are some other lesser known brands out there, but they all generally work the same way. You got to use your crimps with them. I prefer using a wire guardian. You need to learn how to crimp in order to finish these off. You don't knot with these. You can, with the 49 strand, create macrame projects with it. But generally speaking, to finish your ends with this, you do have to use additional findings, being your crimp beads or your crimp tubes. So this is a great material for stringing, simple stringing, even advanced stringing. This is still the way to go. It is really kind of the number one for just stringing on beads on beautiful, putting together beautiful patterns with your beads. Super strong. Okay. Now, something that is a little less strong, but is pretty common as well, is beading thread. There is a big difference between, and I know I should have picked a different color. Here, let me grab a different one. So beading thread is very, very different than bead stringing wire. Bead stringing wire is made out of stainless steel that has been coated in nylon. Beading thread is not. Beading thread is exactly that. It's thread. It also comes in a lot of different brands. Some people like Wildfire, some people like Fireline, some people like 1G or Nymo or any other that is out there. I prefer the Wildfire personally. It is thermally bonded, which means that it is heat treated. It has this like kind of, it's almost like a wax finish to it where you don't have to condition it. You don't have to add anything extra to it. It makes really nice knots and it is super, super secure. Now, the difference here is that you don't use this for stringing. Can you use it for stringing? Of course you can, but this is not nearly as strong as your bead stringing wire. You finish this with knots where you finish this with actual hardware. This you use a needle with. This you don't. This is for seed beads and bead weaving, right? You use it for, you know, creating beautiful seed bead designs. You can string seed beads on it. You can use this with your, you know, the bead spinner. It's really nice to use for the bead spinner. It is lightweight and thin, so it can go through your projects or your beads several times. Whereas this, you take this through your bead once. This, you can actually take this through your bead several times, but it's not super, super strong. So when it comes to using your heavier beads and your heavier gemstones, this is definitely not my recommendation. I would definitely recommend using bead stringing wire instead. But if seed beads are your thing and you're interested in all those amazing seed bead patterns and seed bead techniques that are out there, beading thread is the key word here, because you put thread onto a needle. You don't put your bead stringing wire onto a needle. Okay. Also, this stuff comes in a lot of different colors, whether it is Wildfire or 1G or Fireline, whatever it is. It comes in a wide variety of colors, comes in a couple of different sizes to accommodate your needles and your beads. But definitely have a ton of color choices that are available. Okay. All right. Now, the next stringing material would be stretch cord. Stretch cord, no findings are needed for stretch cord. I've got elasticity here, but it comes in, you know, I can't think of some of the other ones. There's elasticity, there's elonga, there's a couple of different brands, but they're all stretch, right? And they may be clear, they may be black, they may be a color, but it is stretch material, and you don't use any hardware with this. You just string your beads onto it and you secure your beads with a knot, and you will get stretchy designs. You can create necklaces with this and stretch them over your head, but it is most commonly used for stretch bracelets. You do have to know the knotting technique, because you can't just tie a simple knot with this stuff. It'll come undone. So there are a couple of different knotting techniques that you would use with this, and then always add a dab of glue to make sure that your knot stays nice and secure. But you can get this in the single form like this one, or elongo, which is several threads, stretchy threads together. So it's, you know, it's a bunch of different threads. I'm not particularly a huge fan of it. And the reason is because I find that people struggle with the knotting technique. If you do not know what you're doing, when it comes to knotting, you're going to put a bracelet together and then it's going to come apart on you. The knotting part of this, though this is considered a beginner product for beginners because it's easy to use, is a little bit, it's a little bit misleading, because quite honestly, the knotting part of this is more upper level beginner to intermediate type technique. So I always kind of worry when I send a beginner to use an elastic material, just because learning the techniques for it can be a little bit of a challenge. But once you get it, you're good to go, and you can create amazing pieces of jewelry that are going to last a really, really long time. I do think it's a little bit unfair to say, oh, if you can create a knot, you can create a piece of jewelry. Yeah, you can. You can with elastic materials, but if you don't know the correct way to make those knots, that piece of jewelry is going to come apart. And that can be really, really discouraging, particularly if you are a beginner. My daughter, is 15. A lot of you guys know her. She's hung out with us quite a bit, and she is a maker. She has a really nice knotting technique that I think is phenomenal. That I did not even know about until she showed it to me. So there are several really nice knotting techniques to this stuff that can be learned, but you can't just tie a regular knot. So this, again, it's great for stretch projects, bracelets, necklaces, ankle bracelets, things like that. No hardware needed. The only thing that you do have to be very, very careful about is that you need to be sure that your beads that you're using don't have any sharp edges, and that any metal beads that you're using also don't have any sharp edges or little burrs on them, because it will cut through this. There are specific crimps that are specifically designed for stretch material. I don't use them. I think that is it'll cut through your stretch material. I'm just being honest with you. I don't trust them. I definitely don't trust a regular crimp on this by any means. So Debbie says, so bead weaving bracelets with bicones and crystals are best done with what? Thread. Your threads. Any of the threads. Wildfire, Fireline, Nymo, 1G, thread, for sure. Bead weaving needs to be done with threads. You don't bead weave with your bead stringing wire, because you can't put a needle on the end of this. So 100% your thread. Anything that needs a needle, it's got to go onto your thread. See, even Nita says, elastic knotting technique, do tell. I typically hate making stretchy bracelets because I don't trust it. So I think we should do a separate live where we talk about knotting for elasticity, or just elastic cords in general, because I would love to have Ari here to show you her technique for it, but there are several to use. So yeah, you got to be sure that you know how to knot this in order to use it. So I am not so sure that I know that I don't particularly believe that it's the most beginner friendly. Two says, Ari needs to teach us that knot. Yes, she does. Sandy said, can you share her technique with us sometime? Absolutely. Let's plan on doing that as soon as I can. She will have fall break coming up soon. So when she's home during a weekday, we'll get her here so that we can do that, because I think that would be a great show for sure. Yep. Danette said, I tried to use a crimp one time with stretch. Big mistake. It cuts straight through the stretch cord. Yep. Laurie says, what do you think of Opalon? Opalon, that's the one I was trying to remember the name of. It's another great stretch cord. I like it. I think that there's a time and a place for elasticity, which is a single thread, versus Opalon and Elongo, which are multi threads. They're like really thin stretch cords all together. I think that it's great. I really do. I thought I saw another one. Let's see here. I'm just looking through, and if there are questions, again, guys, if there are questions that get missed, I promise we'll write them down. Danette said, I know I used a surgeon's knot for a stretch bracelet. Yeah, surgeon's knots will work. You gotta, you still have to be really, really careful about that. And you've got to be able to use some glue on it, because otherwise that surgeon's knot, it'll come undone on you. What's the difference between a 4mm druck and a 4mm pearl? We will talk about that here in just a little bit when we get to the bead section. We're almost there. Let's go through the rest of the stringing materials, and then we're going to talk beads. All right. So another option for stringing materials, beading materials, is going to be not nylon. Nylon can come in a lot of different varieties. This is some Chinese knotting cord. You can also, where is I thought I pulled out some Eslon, Ceylon, nylon cord. The knotting cord, here's some, this is just a cut piece of some S-Lawn. S-Lawn comes in a ton of colors. The knotting cords, the Asian knotting cords also come in a lot of different colors. You can tell they're a bit different, so they're all going to kind of come a little bit differently. The Chinese knotting cord or the Asian knotting cords are usually some sort of braided cord, whereas S-Lawn is usually a twisted cord of some variety. These are synthetics, and that's really kind of what we should kind of tell ourselves when we're talking about these. We should refer to them as synthetics, because these are made out of plastics in one way, shape, or form. There is some sort of plastic element to them. That means that you can melt these. Not all beading materials can be melted, but anything that is synthetic can be melted at the ends. So if it frays, you can melt it. If you want to make a knot and you want to secure the ends, you can melt the ends. You guys have seen me do that with a lot of different things. S-Lawn is great for it. This stuff, the Asian knotting cord is great for it. I like to make adjustable bracelets and melt the ends. Macrame, it's great for that. You definitely can string onto this, though you do have to finish this off with some kind of knot. But again, the bonus of using a synthetic is that you can melt the ends to keep it nice and clean, which I really, really like. So when it comes to nylons and synthetics, think macrame, think larger whole beads, because obviously this is not going to fit through a lot of your beads. There are different diameters for both the S-Lawn, C-Lawn, and the nylon knotting cords. And so you're going to be able to use some of the beads that have a larger hole. Really enjoy using this in combination with something else. So if I wanted to do like a macrame project, I may use bead stringing wire as the core and then use one of these to knot over the top of it. And then I can melt the ends to make it nice and clean. So really, really does a nice job of making a clean end because it will melt. I love this. Danette says, I couldn't figure out why my thread didn't melt. Now I know. And then Margaret says, hemp doesn't melt. Ask me how I know. Exactly. Synthetics are the only ones that will melt. The exception to that rule would be waxed linen. Now, waxed linen is not a synthetic. However, the wax coating on the outside will melt to a certain degree, but at the same time, it will catch on fire. So you have to be very, very careful when you are melting waxed cord, because all you want to do, you don't want to set it on fire. All you want to do is you just want to heat up that wax coating so that it becomes tacky, so that you can like smush it down to create a clean end, right? Otherwise you are going to melt through that wax, and then you are going to set the cord part of it on fire. So definitely ask me how I know kind of situation there. All right. Speaking of hemp, here is some hemp. Hemp comes in a lot of different diameters, a lot of different colors. This is a very natural kind of boho. I put this right up there with cotton thread, or cotton cord, rather, I shouldn't say thread, for macrame. It's great for knotting techniques, but it will not melt. As we have discovered, this, because it is a natural, even though it has been dyed, it is still considered a natural, so it will not melt at the end. You must use some sort of knotting technique and some sort of glue in order to finish your ends with macrame. It typically makes a big chunky knot, and if you don't like big chunky knots, then you can add findings to the end of this. You can add cord ends to it, glue on cord ends, fold over cord ends, things like that will work on this, particularly the thicker diameter of this. Whereas the thinner diameter, you can get away with tying the knots and it not being huge and chunky and in the way. All right. Last but not least, and certainly not the end of all stringing materials or just beading materials in general, is leather. This is one of my very favorite things to use. I just ordered this one. I'll be using some of this in the very, very near future. This is great for large hole beads. It gives a nice, strong kind of boho feel. You can thread on heavy things onto this. It, again, comes in a lot of different diameters. You can use it for knotting. You can use it for macrame. You can use it for stringing, but you're very limited at your finishing techniques. You're either going to tie a knot and have a big chunky knot, or you're going to have to use some sort of cord end. Cord ends, fold over cord ends are the best. The next best thing would be a glue on cord end. I never really trust those very much. You can wire wrap the ends if you want to, if that's your thing, but this is definitely for larger hole beads. Even the 0.5 millimeter is still a little on the chunky side, so it needs to go through beads that can accommodate that. This is definitely not good for, you know, putting seed beads on or anything like that. So I've covered most of the bases. The only other things that we didn't really talk about as far as this is concerned, and part of the reason that I didn't is because it is also in a previous video, would be artistic wire, which is your dead soft wires, and your German style wires for wire wrapping. This is more stringing related. Those two things you can string onto them, but those are more wire, like creating structure. So if you're interested in knowing more detail about bead stringing wire, the ins and outs of the packaging, and 7 versus 19 versus 49, definitely check out our previous question and answer video. Also, if you want to know about artistic wire and German style wire, you want to check that video out as well, so that we can move on to something else. All right. So Susie says, what width would you recommend for synthetic cords, 0.8 or 1 millimeter? And honestly, it depends on your beads. So I say that, and that might not be a super fair answer. Truthfully, I stick with the 0.8 because the 1 millimeter just seems to be a little chunky, whether it is elasticity or some other synthetic. The 0.8 will accommodate the most beads, right? Anything that's 1 millimeter, you're talking, that's pretty big. So sometimes it won't fit through just my everyday beads, and I have to bump up to a bead with a larger hole. But really, it's kind of project specific. What is the difference between knotting thread and this thread? Which thread? Knotting thread and, like, I'm confused. Danette, you got to give me some more information. All right, let's see. Let's see. Trying to... All right. And again, I'm scrolling back and I will still even miss some. So even if I miss it, doesn't mean that we won't catch it later. Okay. I promise. Okay. So, knotting cord for pearls. That's totally different. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's let me see if I've got one that I can show you here. I didn't pull any of that out. However, I will mention it quickly. So this is silk, natural silk for knotting pearls. This is different from a lot of the others because this has a needle on the end of it. It's already on there. I don't know if you can tell, but it was woven into the thread so that you do not have like this big bulky double cord that you're trying to shove through pearls. So if you are going to do any kind of pearl knotting, this is the kind of cord that you want to use that is carded. It comes in different sizes. The sizes are by number. The larger the number, the thicker the cord. But it comes with the needle already on it so that you don't have doubled over thread. It is very, very difficult to take a needle and just regular thread and not pearls, because you have to fold the cord over on your needle. That's why this takes that away. This is 100% the best way to do that. Now, is that the only use of this natural silk cord? No, you could use this for other things if you want to. You can use it for stringing projects. You can use it for all kinds of things, but this is 100% made for stringing and knotting pearls or other beads where you need to create the knot. And it's the one that has the needle on it already. Do you always have to pre-stretch silk cord? Nope, not anymore. So a lot of people ask that question. It's a really good question. Because once upon a time, when you bought silk cord, you needed to stretch it. And what that meant was you needed to take it and you wanted to take it off of the card and stretch it out. And then you needed to soak it. And then you needed to let it dry. And then you needed to soak it again and pull all the kinks out of it, and then let it dry. And then you needed to iron it if you wanted to, or whatever. You don't have to do that anymore. Okay. Silk cords come a really, really long way. You don't have to do that. The most that you need to do with this is you take it off of the cord and just kind of pull it a little bit, just to kind of help to get the creases out of it. You know how, like, when you've had your shirt folded for a long time, it gets the creases in it. This has creases in it where it's been wrapped around the card. But as far as like actually stretching the silk, you don't have to do that. Most natural silks, particularly Griffin, have been pre-stretched before they have been put onto the cards. Why does this matter? It matters because if you don't have a silk that's been pre-stretched, when you go and you knot your beads and then you wear it a few times and the weight of the beads start to pull on the silk, it will pull spaces in between your knots. So that's why that question gets asked for anybody who is not familiar with that. But nowadays, particularly the ones that have been dyed and colored, they've all been pre-stretched. So you don't have to worry about that. You can take it off and just try to pull the wrinkles out of it and you're good to go. Oh, Adrian, I am so sorry for your loss. I'm so thankful that you are here. Thank you for being with us. Mary wants to know what's the best time to use wrapped loops versus simple loops. I'm going to make a note of that one because we've got to move on to the beads first. And then let's circle back around to that if we can. Please don't let me forget. Okay, so we're going to talk about another one of the questions that I get asked very often is, please tell me about different beads and different shapes. What do they mean? I need to know more about beads. This is also like stringing materials. We could talk about this forever, but we're going to try to keep this as quick and concise as we can. And if we need to go further into this, we absolutely can do that. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about check glass beads. Check glass beads are the most common bead, I think, that you guys will see, at least me, use. I do use other things like freshwater pearls and things like that, but check glass beads are the majority of what I use, and they come in a lot of different shapes and sizes and styles, and that can be a little bit confusing. So we're gonna do a quick little run through of some of these. So when you talk about a bead, whether it is a check glass bead or a crystal bead or a glass bead of any variety, when you talk about the cut of the bead, that refers to the shape of that bead. And beads come in so many different shapes and sizes, right? One cut can come in a wide variety of sizes. So we're going to kind of look at the most common ones. Okay. So the first one we're going to talk about is the check fire polish. I use check fire polish a lot. These are also referred to as check rounds, which is kind of misleading because they're not perfectly round. This is more of an oval shaped bead. It actually starts out more round, but this has a bunch of facets on it. As you can see all the little facets? The facets are the flat surfaces that are cut into a bead to give it that sparkle. That's how the light catches it, is with all of those facets. So these are originally round beads, but then they're pressed into a round shape, and then they are cut to create that facet. And the reason they're called fire polish is because then they're reheated to smooth those surfaces out. So these are heat treated several times. Like heat is a big part of the process here. You can look up really cool videos on how Czech fire polish beads are made, or if you have the opportunity to go over to Prague, as some of you have done. I wish I could make that trip, and maybe one day it's on my bucket list, but to see how these are created in person. But this is probably the most common of Czech glass beads, is the Czech fire polish. So that comes in a ton of different varieties as far as like colors, finishes, and things like that, and sizes, of course. So that's your Czech fire polish. All right. The next kind of common bead would be pressed glass. Let me see. Let me grab another. So your pressed glass is going to be any of your shapes, like hearts, flowers, leaves, things like that. These coin-shaped beads. These are also Czech glass, obviously, because that's what we're talking about here. But these are poured into molds. So you can see it gets poured into a mold to get that shape. And you can see the seam. See how along the edges, there's a seam where you can see where they are poured into the mold, and then the two molds are put together to create that three-dimensional shape. So that's not a shape on one side and flat on the other. You get that shape on both sides, which is really, really nice. But this is what is considered pressed glass. I have had people ask me, well, is pressed glass like, I don't know why, but the sound of pressed glass sounds like it is less than for some reason to some people. I'm not really entirely sure why. It is actually a little bit more expensive because of the molds that have to be created for the pressed glass to go into. So it is definitely not like lower quality by any stretch of the imagination, just because its process is someone has to carve the molds for these. So that's pressed glass. All right, faceted round beads are exactly that. They're rounds and they're faceted. It's a little bit more of a round shape than the Czech fire polish. I don't have any to show you, but that's really kind of just a general term for any kind of round bead that's got a facet on it, whether it is Czech glass or not. All right, next up would be some table cut. Table cuts are really, really cool. Table cut beads can come in a lot of different sizes and styles and shapes, but they have a flat surface on them. And that flat surface goes on sometimes on just one side, but most of the time it is on both sides. So that table cut, it can be opaque or it can be see-through, which gives like a window effect to the beads. These are polished flat on the sides. So you can see it has that, it looks like a table. And when I think of it, that's kind of the way to think of it. It's like it has a table, a flat table surface. I don't think that's where the name comes from. I think that actually comes from the kind of, I don't know. It could come from the kind of machinery that's on a table. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But it has this flat surface. And again, that can be on the front side or on the back side, but it has been smoothed and polished flat. Okay, so that is table cut. And again, they come in a lot of different shapes and styles. So table cut can mean a lot of things, but if it has that smooth, polished, shiny surface, that's what you're looking for, like a tabletop. Okay, druck beads. This is the one that people get confused about. Like, what is a druck bead? Why is it called that? Druck is just the Czech word for round. That is all it is. It's just a smooth, round bead. That's all. There's nothing else to this. It is pressed into shape and then polished. It's just a round bead. And it's funny because it's not exactly perfectly round. It is a little oblong shape-wise. It's not a perfectly round bead, but for all intents and purposes that's what it is. Now, somebody asked earlier, what is the difference between a druck bead and a pearl? Well, a pearl, like a freshwater pearl, or even a check glass pearl, those are all quite different. So this is a check glass bead. A check glass pearl, the process for making it is a little bit different. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but there is in fact a difference. There's also a weight difference, something that I definitely need to investigate and get back to you on, because that is an interesting question, but there is 100% a difference. Let me show you just so you can see. These are check glass pearls. This is a check glass druck. They look very similar, but the creation of these beads is very, very different. And I would need to get back to you on that. So yeah, just know there is a difference. I just don't technically know what the difference is, but 100%. And I think a lot of it has to do with the coating that's on them. And then of course, like freshwater pearls are natural. And I mean, they can be dyed, but you know what I mean? Like they're found in freshwater oysters. Whereas these are man-made. So druck just means round. I'm not saying drug. I'm not saying drunk. My Southern accent might say otherwise, but druck, D-R-U-K, it just in the Czech language means round. And that's where all Czech glass beads come from, is the Czech. So yeah, druck, just round. Come in a lot of styles, a lot of finishes, lots of varieties. All right, now we are going to talk just a little bit about specialty cuts, because again, we could get into this and go on forever and ever and ever. But there are specialty cut Czech glass beads. They come in a lot of different kinds. So this would be a melon bead. This is a Czech glass bead, but it is called a Czech glass melon. And you can see it has these little grooves in it that give it some different texture, little different dimensions. So kind of looks like a pumpkin bead. That is actually a different thing altogether, but very similar. It is just a bead that has the little grooves in it and can come in a wide variety of sizes and colors, but that's a melon. Okay. Then there is the center cut, which to me is one of the most confusing shapes, because it is very similar to a star cut, but not. I have absolutely no idea why they call this center cut. I'm not sure. I don't know enough about the process to tell you, but this interesting kind of nugget-like shape is center cut. And I don't know if it has anything to do with being able to see the inside of the bead or not, because some of these are actually opaque, so that doesn't even make any sense. I don't know, but I know that I do love this shape because it adds really nice texture to your designs. But that is a center cut, not to be confused with the star cut, which is very, very similar. I don't have any star cut to show you, but all right. Then this is the turbine bead, also similar to Saturn beads. The Saturn bead looks like the planet Saturn with rings around it. The turbine bead is similar in that it has like the belt around it, but it has the twisted top and bottom to it that looks like a turbine. Right? Then there are teardrops that come in a lot of different varieties. They can be faceted, they can be smooth. This is just a little teardrop. There's also a difference in the drill hole on these, and I didn't pull any out. Let's see if I've got something nearby that I can show. I can use this as I can use this as an example. So teardrop beads and other kind of specialty cut beads can come drilled in two different varieties. Okay, the one that I have in my hand, this is a crystal. Obviously, this is a not a Czech glass bead, but it's still a teardrop shape, and it is drilled briolette style. briolette style means that it is drilled across the top, meaning that it is drilled side to side around the, or at the top of the bead. That is pretty common in briolettes. That is very common in lots of different teardrops, but a teardrop can be either or. It can be drilled across the top, or it can be drilled top to bottom like these, where the drill hole goes from the top of the bead all the way down. So you string those this way instead of across, if that makes any sense. I hope that it does. I should have pulled some briolettes out, but we were talking about check glass beads, so I didn't really grab any. Hold on. Here's another variety of a briolette where it is top drilled. So you can see it's drilled across the top. Gemstones can come that way. Lots of beads can come that way, where they're drilled, top drilled. Top drilled means side to side, whereas this is drilled top to bottom. If I could get my, like that, right? But teardrops can come again in any shape, style, however, you know, however you like them. Also, you can get rondelles. Rondelles are ones that I think people get a little confused about sometimes. Rondelles can be check glass, they can be glass, they can be crystal, they can be anything. A rondelle is a bead it was a round bead, it's been kind of squished, right? So it's a squished bead. They can be flat on the tops and the bottoms with the facet going around the edge, but that shape is really kind of what makes a rondelle. It's not a he-she bead, it's because it's faceted. A lot of he-she beads are smooth, but they still have that rondelle shape. But these are a really good example of a rondelle. So a rondelle is usually wider than it is tall, if that helps. Can be faceted, can be smooth, can be flat on the top and the bottom and faceted just around the middle, but is a very common shape of bead to use, but can be kind of difficult with measuring because, again, a lot of times it's wider than it is tall. All right, and then another one that I pulled out just to show you is a crackle. And crackles look like just like that. They look crackled on the inside. It's a heat treatment that they do to the bead. So it's just a round, it doesn't even have to be round, but a round bead that has been heated to the point where the inside of it cracks and crackles, but it doesn't make the bead weak. You can still, it's a nice strong bead. It just gives it a really cool effect on the inside. So crackle beads can be regular glass, check glass, plastic, you know, crystal. I haven't seen a lot of crystal crackle. I think it's a harder process. They're very, very expensive, but that's a crackle bead for you. So, all right, that's kind of an overview of beads. Now, again, this is not the only kinds of beads that exist in the world. There are so many other kinds. There are like pave. Pave means that it is a bead that is coated in other things. Doesn't necessarily have to be crystals, but usually it's some sort of clay that has been, crystals have been added to it. That's pave. There's, let's see, there's the cubes. You guys have seen me use a lot of cubes. Cubes can be any kind of bead, crystal, gemstone, check glass, and bicones are the same way. A bicone can be a crystal, a gemstone, a check glass. It's just a cut. It's just a shape, right? So that's what the bicone shape looks like. There's the flower, bellflower. There's a lot of different flower shapes that are available. So if you ever have a question about a bead shape, post your picture, because somebody out there will be able to tell you what that shape is. There are so many different kinds of bead shapes in the world. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with them. But hopefully I've given you a pretty good overview of some fairly common beads that we use on a regular basis here. Ooh, Lisa says, can we do Victorian Friday? I love that idea. I love that. All right. Rondelles are close to cathedral shapes. Yes. So cathedral beads, I wish I had a cathedral bead here to show you. Cathedral beads are very, very similar, but a cathedral bead is kind of a combo bead. I know I have some cathedral beads around here that I can show you. So a cathedral bead is interesting because a cathedral bead is a combination of like a rondelle facet or a check fire polish facet, but it also has the table cut windows in it. So it'll have like that really interesting facet to it, but the facets are usually large facets that have been polished really, really smooth. And a lot of times they will be like have a metal wash on the top and the bottom, but you're right. They are very, very similar to rondelles because of the shape of them, but they have the facet surfaces on them are often table cut and polished really, really flat and shiny. Oh gosh. I do a lot of talking here. Okay, let's see. Are there other questions? So I do want to get back to the question that was asked about, oh wait, hold on. Gail says, what is English cut? It's just a style. It's very similar to, the center cut and the star cut. And it's just where the facets are placed. I wish I had one to show you here. I didn't even think about it. But it can be a check glass bead. It can be a gemstone bead. It is very often a check glass bead, but it is a really nice cut for strong gemstones, because not all gemstone beads can stand up to these crazy facets, right? So a lot of times, like you'll get like some strong beads that can handle facets, or like lapis that can lapis can handle a really good strong. It's a strong bead that can handle a lot of cuts to it. But then something a little bit softer, like what would be a good example? I'm trying to think. Amethyst is another one that can stand up to a lot of facets, but the softer the material of the gemstone, the least facets it can take. So, and again, that's a whole other video for a whole other day. But it's just where the facets are placed. So it's just kind of like a style that somebody came up with, and then they gave it that name. Let's see. Laurie says she's not a fan of the crackle beads, but then other people think that the crackles are a lot of fun. I like the crackles because of the way that they show the light, but can still be smooth. So you can use them anywhere a smooth bead can be used, but you get all of that shimmer that a facet would give. I think they're interesting. I have seen some crackle beads that look very cheap, but for the most part, they are price point wise very similar to all of the other, if they're check glass. But some of them I have seen that have been poorly done. They look kind of cheap. So there was a question. I gotta answer two questions. So I'm so glad is keeping up with questions, because there's no way I can I can keep up with all these. Okay, hold on. I have so many things. My ADD is going bananas right now. Okay, let's go back to the Mary question. Mary's question was, when is a good time to use a wrapped loop versus a simple loop? And really, it is going to be project specific. And I say that because nowadays, if you get really good quality like eye pins, they're strong. You don't have to worry that they're going to open up on you or anything like that, as long as they're good quality. But the difference is really the fact that a simple loop can be opened and closed, whereas a wrapped loop cannot. You know what I mean? So if you want extra security and you don't need to open that loop to add other things, then a wrapped loop is definitely your more secure way to go. But even simple loops can be very, very secure depending on the materials. But really, that's the biggest difference, is that if you need to open that loop for some reason to connect things, that's really the easiest way to explain it. However, there is a little bit of a difference when it comes to length. So if you do a wrapped loop, you have to remember that usually equals 6 wraps, 3 on each side. That can add length to a design that might not necessarily be needed, and sometimes can take away from the design. So if you want less wire, but you still need the connection, a simple loop is probably your best bet, because it does not add additional length other than just the length of the loop itself. Whereas a wrapped loop, you get the length of the loop plus 3 wraps, and then the length of the loop and 3 wraps on the other side. So there's definitely a size, a length portion of it to take into consideration. But I think it's really kind of project specific, because the materials are going to be strong pretty much no matter what. All right. There was another question that was part of last time's question, or the last time we did this, and I didn't get a chance to answer it, but it was a really good one. When making a 3-strand bracelet, or just a multi-strand bracelet in general, do the strands need to be the same length? And the answer to that is yes. When it comes to creating a multi-strand necklace, that's different. But when we're talking about a bracelet, yes, all 3 or 2 or 4 or 17 strands, they all need to be the same length. And that can be kind of tricky, because if you're using different bead shapes, obviously you can see, like, I have these beads laid out, the same amount of beads for a 6 millimeter versus an 8 millimeter there's going to be a big difference there. So that's where using little other beads as supplements, like seed beads or spacer beads or bead caps even, can help even out the difference with the beads and their measurements. But yes, if you are making a multi-strand bracelet, all strands need to be the same length. The exception to that rule is when the connector that you're using, if you're using a connector, maybe it is shaped like, so a standard connector for something would be like 3 loops, just like that, right? And you can do your strands, and then you're going to come over to something like, or maybe you're just using jump rings, whatever. But a decorative connector could possibly have a loop here, a loop here, and a loop here, right? And all of this is like decorative, but the loops, 2 of the loops are in the same place, but one of the loops is not. That would make this strand right here shorter by just a little bit, right? So you got to take that into consideration. But for the most part, unless you've got a component that is shaped like this with different positionings of your loops, all of your strands need to be the same length. All right, let's see. I know there are so many other questions. What is my favorite extender for necklaces? Do you like chain, jump rings, or purchased? I like chain personally. That's just me. Chain is so easy to use, or I'll just make my own with some jump rings. But I think that I think that there are some really nice ones that are out there on the market, but they can be really expensive. So it just kind of depends. It really just depends. And you have to think, like, if it's a necklace and it's going to go on the back of your necklace, how decorative do you want it to be? Like, add a jump ring. Not a jump ring. Add a bicone to the bottom of it. Wire wrap a bicone. That's like I'm always like, just put a little dangle on the end of it to dress it up. What's the difference between asymmetrical and symmetrical? How do you determine how many beads to use in each, if that makes sense? So I don't know that I can answer that question necessarily, but symmetrical versus asymmetrical is really just kind of in the definition of those words. So a symmetrical design means that everything is the same on both sides. So whether that means you have a focal in the middle that, for whatever reason, in this looks like an eyeball. your focal in the middle, if you so choose to have a focal, and everything on the right matches everything on the left. So whatever beads you put here are the same on both sides. That makes it symmetrical, so that if you folded it in half, it would be the same. Asymmetrical is the opposite of that. If you fold it in half, the sides are going to be different. The lengths need to be the same, or if they don't even have to be the same. That's a bad thing to say. They don't have to be the same. In fact, you may not even be able to fold it in half if you're using that as your visual. So that would put maybe your focal over here on the left with some beads, and then over here on the right, maybe you have different beads, right? Asymmetrical means that if you folded it in half, it wouldn't be the same, but symmetrical, if you folded it, it would be. And really, it's, if you're making it into I still can't answer the question about the beads. It really just kind of depends on the design. I hope that helped. Sandy, you're right. And I've noticed that too. Sandy says, why do most cathedral beads seem to be so small? Or is it just me? I seldom see any bigger than 4 or 6 millimeter. 6 millimeter is really kind of industry standard. I don't think I've ever seen a cathedral bead bigger than that. I know that they exist, but they're not very common. Let's see. Everybody's talking about different styles. We definitely should do one of these Q&As where we talk about style. Because I think that is an important lesson to go through for sure. Wire gauges make a difference with wrapped and simple loops too. Is that correct? Yes, it is 100% correct. So usually the thinner the gauged wire, a wrapped loop is going to be more secure. You know, if you're using anything smaller than like a 24 gauge wire, I just wouldn't trust the loop, a simple loop on those. Let's see. All right. Well, it's been an hour. I'm going to turn you guys around. It's been an hour. And I feel like we've only discussed a small amount of things, right? And we really could continue on. There are always questions that are going to come up. We didn't even talk about things like a Druck bead that's top drilled. If you want to know about that, come join me on Friday over on Art Beads, because I'm using some beads that are like that. I'm also going to be using cushioned round beads, which are completely different. It's like a coin, but it's puffed. There are so many different bead shapes. There are so many different things that we could talk about. We could talk about style. We could talk about different kinds of chains. We could talk about lengths for things, connectors, findings. So I think that we should try to do this maybe once a month. So that being said, I will work on the calendar for that. What I need you guys to do is to keep cataloging your questions, because I and my team is really good about grabbing the questions and saving them for later. But you can post those in our groups as well, and we will be able to talk about those during our other question and answer shows. Finial beads, I just didn't even get a chance to talk about those. So yeah, we have so much more that we can discuss and talk about. And you guys know, I'll always be upfront with you. If there's something that I don't know, I'm not going to pretend like I know it, and we can research it together. So let's plan to do this again. I'll get that schedule together for you guys, so that you can be planning your questions. Okay. Because I think this is important information. A lot of these questions I wish that somebody had answered for me along the way. So if you think of questions, just be saving them, make a mental note, or you can post them in the groups, or you can send them to us or whatever. And we'll do this again so we can talk some more. All right, everybody. I'm going to go for now. But I hope that you have learned something today, or if you haven't, maybe I just refreshed your memory about something, or maybe I have sparked your creativity and you want to go try out some different bead shapes in your designs or a new stringing material. But I will be back with you guys again on Friday. So set your reminders for for 1 p.m. Eastern for our Feel Good Friday show coming at you this Friday. And I'm going to be starting to roll in some Halloween-y designs for our Feel Good Friday. So if you are looking forward to that, I've got your spooky cute covered coming up. Hardwired, we're meeting at 4 p.m. Eastern this afternoon. So if you would like to join Hardwired, I think our deadline is over, but we might let you sneak in if you wanted to. But Hardwired members will be meeting at 4 p.m. this afternoon Eastern. Okay. All right, everybody. I love you. Have an amazing rest of your afternoon. Have an incredible Wednesday and a Thursday, and I'll see you on Friday. Okay. Mwah. Bye, guys.